Look at these two sunset paintings. Does one feel warmer than the other? Why do you think so? Right, that's because of color temperature. But how do we know which colors are warm and which are cool? The simplest way is to think of fire and ice. When you say fire, we feel warm. And what colors are present there? Reds, oranges, and yellows. On the opposite, ice, which can contain greens, blues, and purples, is generally on the cooler side. And that's one way to remember our warms and cools. In case of our limited palette, red and yellow are on the warm side and blue is on the cool side. But there are other ways to identify a color's temperature. Divide the color wheel in half. Technically, we can treat one half as cool and the other half as warm. Take this color wheel by Arts and Foundation's website for example. From red-violet to yellow-green, they are considered warm. And the other half, with blues, violets, and greens, are considered cool. We can do the same to our own color wheel, and I think this line divides them, marking the upper part as cool and the lower part as warm. But watercolor pigments are versatile. All blue pigments are not necessarily cool. There are also warm variations, and the same applies to red and yellow. Determine its bias. This is a sort of an intuitive way of identifying a color's temperature. You need to swatch, see, and observe if there are traces of other colors in your pigment. For example, which of these yellows is warmer? If you pick the one at the right, then you're correct. It has an orange bias and appears to have a red mixed in it, while the other one looks like it has traces of blue in it. And as mentioned earlier, blue is cool and red is warm. This is lemon yellow and Gamboge Nova. Can you determine which yellows are warm? You got it. Those with bits of red and leaning towards yellow-orange. Now, which of these feels cooler? The one at the right is cooler since it has a violet bias and appears to have a bit of blue in it, while the other one seems to have a bit of yellow mixed in it. Again, blue is cool and yellow is warm. These are vermilion hue and rose madder. Which of these reds appear warm? Right, those with traces of yellow in them and appear near orange in the color wheel. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Which of these blue is cooler? The one at the left has bits of red in it, while the one at the right appears to have yellow mixed with it. Before I answer that, let's check the color wheel again. Both red and yellow are on the warm side of the color wheel. So, how do we know which is cool and which is warm? In fact, some artists think that all blues are cool, while others think the opposite. But here's something to keep in mind. Most of the time, we paint oceans and seas with blue-green, so blues with traces of yellow in them and seem to be leaning towards blue-green are considered cool. And ones with bits of red and leaning towards violet is warm. So here, the one at the left is warm, that's ultramarine blue, and the one at the right, turquoise blue, is cool. What about this group? Which are warm blues? Right, only two of them. Now, why does it matter to know your color's temperature? If you want to suggest distant mountains, your better choice will be a blue. And if you want to paint grasses in the foreground, nearer the viewer, then it only makes sense to mix a warmer green. That's because cool colors recede or go back in space and warm colors advance. This is due to the wavelengths of warm colors being longer, so your eyes see them sooner than the shorter wavelengths of cooler colors. Enough of those technical terms. So, if you want to paint landscapes to suggest warmth or coolness, it's better to use colors with the right temperature. For comparison, here's another version where I use the opposite color temperature. Feels different, right? So here are the two sunset paintings again. Which feels warmer? Yes, the one at the right. I used warm primary colors on this one, which made it appear warmer. But this is not an absolute rule. Take this painting for example. It looks like the grass in the middle is warmer than the one in the foreground. And I also used a warm blue in the distant mountains, and it seems like I still used the correct colors. It really all depends on the mood that you want to create in your paintings. You could also avoid muddy colors when you consider a pigment's temperature. You might have experienced firsthand or heard from someone else that greens and violets are the hardest secondary colors to mix. And that goes the same for me, until I discovered why. If you want to successfully mix a clear and vibrant secondary color, you must take the temperature into consideration. Let's look at this simple color chart for example. On the left, I have warm and cool blue, and at the top, I have cool and warm yellow, warm and cool red. A warm blue and warm yellow mixed together will produce a warm green. A warm blue and cool yellow will mix a different green. Mix and match and see what happens. Now, this is where it gets muddy. Vermilion hue is a warm red and Prussian blue is a cool blue. When mixed together, they should produce violet, right? Mud, a brown. Why? Because vermilion has an orange bias which appears to have a bit of yellow in it, and Prussian blue has a green bias, meaning all primary colors are present. Blue plus red plus yellow equals brown or a neutral color. And we learned that earlier when we created our own chart. If you want to go technical, here's more info on the two pigments from King's Framing and Art Gallery. Prussian blue contains Antwerp blue pigment, while vermilion hue has transparent pyrrole orange, pyrrole red, and isoindolanin yellow. So yes, technically, all primary colors are present, thus producing brown. You have greater chances of producing vibrant secondary color mixtures if you mix colors with the same temperature, but it's not applicable to all warm and cool color combinations. That's why the time spent mixing and testing out different combinations while keeping in mind their temperature is an essential skill that you should learn. Creating swatches might look and feel tedious, but I'd like to quote one of my favorite authors, Charles Swindoll. I'm a real believer in spending some time every day doing what's important rather than doing what's urgent. Let that sink in. A summary on how to tell your color's temperature. Think of fire and ice. Divide the color wheel in half, determine its bias, and learning this will help you avoid muddy colors. And I'll see you in the next video to apply what we have learned so far and paint this simple landscape scene.